On that note, let me give you another example of what this guy does. The owner, it's real common in the trades that people work for a while and maybe they get their master license and all that, and then they get to feeling good and they go, I think I'd go start my own company. Whatever this owner's making, I can make that. So I'll go start my own business. Well, traditionally in the trades, when someone on your payroll does that, they are declared dead to you. Get out of here, give me the keys, go away, leave me alone. You're taking my business, blah, blah, blah. Well, this guy does it 180 degrees opposite. He says, you want to start a company? Tell you what, let me make a deal with you.
Are you tired of working more for less profits in your home service business? What if I could show you $100,000 in hidden annual profits in your business in less than 3 minutes? Would you be interested? And not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend guaranteed. Just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com to see how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now. And we are back on STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast, with another amazing guest. I've got Doug Thorpe with me, and I had the privilege to be on Doug's podcast. Been a few months ago now, maybe even more than that, but it was awesome. So I had to have Doug on here because why not share the awesomeness? Right, Doug? So with that being said, no one knows Doug better than Doug. So Doug, a little backstory, bring us up to speed. Can't wait to get into the conversation.
Hey, thanks, Richard. And it is a pleasure to be here. It was great having you on my show. We had a really live and really strong discussion. I hope I can return the favor. Yeah. So quick backstory. First, let me begin with the end, I guess. My specialty today is I am an executive coach and a business advisor. I kind of wear two hats. But a lot of what I do is always centered on the theme of leadership and leadership development. John Maxwell famously says everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think that's true, regardless of what size your business may be or what effort you might be involved with, whether it's a community, nonprofit kind of thing, volunteer, whatever. Leadership is there or needs to be there. So I've been a student of that game for a long time. I started feeling the call of leadership at an early age. I can get into that story if you want, but basically went through college, got commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army, spent some time on active duty, certainly did a lot of leadership development work there, but brought that with me into the banking world of all things and ended up staying as a banker for about 25 years. Turned my banking career into a consulting business, which ultimately proved to me that business managers need leadership and leadership training, and the consulting turned into the coaching, and here we are.
Awesome. So let's do something really quick because I want my audience to understand this one thing, the last thing you just said. Give us the difference between consulting and coaching. I know what it is, but no one else does. But I want your version.
Yeah, a great question, and it is a challenge. And I was actually on a group call this morning and with a group of coaches that I've called close friends and colleagues here in the area where I live, and we do a monthly mastermind kind of thing. And we were talking about that, actually, reminding ourselves. So I think coaching is intended to lead someone into their own self-discovery and self-development. But the consulting provides sort of the actual suggestion or recommendation on things that could be your next step. And where the challenge comes between the difference of coaching and consulting, coaching in its purest form, at least as the International Coaching Federation calls it, is a journey to self-discovery. And the coach is just kind of that guide to kind of ask questions and maybe reframe the thinking by virtue of the questions they're asking. But by practice, again, according to the International Coaching Federation, we don't give solutions. As a businessman myself, I found that to be a little bit problematic. And while I think the idea of self-discovery is some of the most powerful learning a person can make, there's still reality in the presence of you might just be stuck. You've really genuinely, earnestly tried everything you can think of, and you can't think of anything else. Well, if I can show up as a consultant advisor and give you an idea, and we can explore that idea together, my experience may not be an exact fit, but it could be very close, and it could be just the tipping point you need to push you on to the next level.
Right. My thing is like I love results. I'm a very results driven guy. So the coaching for me, I kind of go into the kind of trainer mode. Trainer, I am assured of results, whoever I work with, if I put my trainer hat on, right? And I love it. So yeah, there's definitely a distinction there. And another thing you just said too, Doug, is that there isn't always a fit. I may be an incredible coach, but it doesn't mean I'm going to help you.
That's right.
Because of the personality differences, that there's a different alignment, perhaps, things like that. And that's something people would ask me occasionally, like, well, why do you bring other business coaches on your podcast? Isn't that competition? I go, listen, there's like 32 million small businesses. I can share a few. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. And you're exactly right. And it's not uncommon that we get engaged and we begin doing work with somebody. And if for everyone's best effort to try to kind of test the chemistry in the early stages, maybe the pre-consult kind of work, pre-commitment even on the contract, you think it'll work and it'll be fine, but you get into doing some of the work and maybe you discover some mismatch there, that the chemistry is not quite right. And I think that's fine. I think I'm always sensitive not to overuse the sports trainer type analogy, because that's very much oriented toward very direct change and result. And you could argue that the business coach, executive coach should be making change as well, which we do. And I even in my own practice, I really stress on defining some measurable results that we want to achieve together, not just what some call woo-woo kind of
Right.
touchy-feely things. I want to, name and claim some specific possible outcomes the individual is going to be looking for, so that we can go to work on that and deliver some tangible result.
Yeah. And I think with me, the owner, their team are still doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not like I'm swooping in to save the day. Okay. And do all this stuff for when everything's going to be magic and I'm going to swoop out and everything's going to run like a Swiss watch. It's just not going to happen. It's time to work. I'm there to help you roll up the sleeves and get this stuff done. Who would I have? And it's not necessarily just with the owner. Who's on the team? Who can help? Right. So we go to work that way. So we're thinking exactly the same. The one thing I will use on the sports analogy that I always tell people too, especially when I have to fire a client, okay, because they're not getting the work done. So you get this head coach, right? They're worth whatever they're being paid. They're great. They go to a team, I don't know, the Bears or someone, and they have a couple seasons and they're horrible. Okay. And they fire him. And he swoops down somewhere else to the next team, and 2 years later he wins the Super Bowl.
Right.
Why is that? Is he a terrible coach or is he a great coach? He's got a ring, you know what I mean? So it's that alignment, right? It's that personality, it's that matchup with either teams and philosophies of the business and operational things and stuff. So people don't understand that aspect, right?
Totally agree. That's right.
And it's important to know that, because I think when I look to work with someone, I do want that alignment. There's people I'll say no to before I have to go through the trouble of getting hired, going 2 months in and saying this isn't a fit. No one wants that. That's a setback for everybody. So I'm always like, are we going to do this? I take them through the right steps, figure this out. I'm not in a hurry to make that happen. And then we're able to move forward. So from a leadership standpoint, since that's your main focus, you talked about managers and leadership, and I think there's a disconnect there too. I'd love you to kind of bring this together. Some people don't think managers are leaders. They think they're managers. They don't understand the correlation between the two. Can you kind of help iron that out for me?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I tell the story that once upon a time, I used to, when I began engagements with clients, I would ask them if they thought there was a difference between management and leadership. And for a time, that was a trick question that people didn't always have a quick response to. But for whatever reason, the world has changed. And I think now, and I've stopped asking the question that way because inevitably people would say, well, finally we got to a place where people were saying, of course, there's a difference between managers and leaders. And so now I simply dive into that by saying, what do you think the difference is? And we'll have a discussion. And then when they turn the table and ask me what I think it is, I sum it up with a phrase that a friend and colleague taught me many, many years ago. It was based on his own effort of studying 30 of the highest performing CEOs that he could get access to. And these were pretty respectable. I mean, it wasn't Tim Cook or Steve Jobs or anybody like that, but these were regional bank presidents and some other executives that were, again, very respectable in their field. But his conclusion was management is about process and leadership is about people. So I take that premise to get back to your point, Richard, that managers can be good managers and they can get a lot of things done. They can hit the numbers, they can meet the deadlines, they can get things accomplished, but they're not necessarily good leaders. And there are those who serve in leadership roles, but they're not necessarily giving management responsibility over certain things. But their leadership can definitely influence where the organization is going. Why? Because they're getting the attention of the people that need to listen, and they're helping shape ideas and strategies and influencing what is going on. Now, the best combination is the person with the management responsibility that does pivot and explore the opportunity to become a bona fide leader. And when you put those two together, that's your perfect storm that can really get a lot of great things done. And the problem with the guy that's a manager only is that inevitably, when you study those stories, it is associated with high employee turnover and not a high degree of employee satisfaction. You're getting the work done, but it's a revolving door.
Right. So what's the goal then? I mean, I can state the obvious. You want a manager / leader, right? We want the perfect storm right there, right? We want that. But do you see companies now really driving towards that, what would you call it? That kind of blend? Are they trying to skill up? Are they bringing you and the skill up managers in the leadership space?
Yes. And I think where it is coming to roost is more and more people and companies of all sizes are finally starting to question the idea of this thing called culture at the company, and that culture is a real thing, regardless of how big or small your company is. Culture is a force. When two people get together, they're going to build a culture. And, you can have a new neighbor, you can have a new friend at work, you can have a new associate that you met in a community group, or like my son's a big golfer. He's met a threesome of other guys that he now likes to golf with. Well, the four of them together now have a culture in how they operate. So culture has been elevated in my mind as a more significant element of business success. And there's a lot of work, and I don't want to deviate here, but there's a lot of work talking about how your culture has to match your brand. You can spend millions of dollars designing and defining a brand that you want to deliver, but if your culture doesn't support that brand, all those brand ideas, you don't have a brand. You simply don't have a brand. And that works for the guy that owns a plumbing company, or he's an electrician or a HVAC company. They build a culture, and culture is better influenced and impacted by leadership rather than management.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very vision driven. That's how we look at it, like a very strategic vision that we put in place. People have something to work for, have that purpose, because culture, Doug, has always been a challenge for people. Like, they have one, but they don't know how to control it. They don't know how to change it. They don't know how to create it. Like you said, it's an organic happening if you don't have purpose, right? People will figure out what their culture is, and it may be horrible. Okay. My son was recently up to his working at a very, very bad culture company, right? Did not want to be there. It was horrible. So finally he tolerated for 2 years. Now he's out, it just comes to a point when just that's never going to change. But I think a lot of people struggle with that. How do I do that? And when you mention branding, people have to realize a brand is how people feel about the product or what service, right? So that's really only going to come through really the way people work and serve inside the business.
Right.
Because they do have customer client contact and all that and people can sense that, they can feel it. When you talk to someone you'll talk to a previous job place they were at, they will talk about the culture. I really liked it there, Trek bicycles, they have an incredible culture. They created their own culture at that place. Mm-hmm. And people would talk about that. They wouldn't talk about anything else. Yeah, they're great. They're phenomenal bikes. I have one I bought 30 years ago. The thing still works. Okay. I mean, they do great things, but people talk about the culture. They love to go to work.
Right. Well, when I start talking with business owners in particular, and the question of culture comes up, if they're mystified or uncertain about creating a culture, I say it's actually pretty simple. It starts with a basic question. How do we want to do our work? How do we want to show up? How do we want to treat each other? How do we want to treat our customers? How do we want to do what we do? And the more you can do on the how part, and I know we can get off in another discussion a la Simon Sinek and the why, define your why. And that's kind of where your brand vision sort of kicks in. That's a little more of the why we're going to do what we do. But the culture comes from how we're going to do it.
I agree. It really matters because when we write ours out, it's just how is everyone in the company the hero in that part of the journey? They have to understand. Here's a why they're important, right? Like why does it matter they do what they do at a level of excellence, right? Because the people before and the people after are dependent on them, right? It all makes a thing. So it's a fascinating, I don't want to call it a topic, but it's an arena, the culture arena. As I've met so many business owners, and some have really good cultures, some have built them, right? I've helped them develop and stuff. And you kind of see the full gamut of what really goes on. But the ones that really from top, so I mean, internally from the first call that comes into a company for whatever reason, for, service, sales, product, whatever it is, all the way through really past the deliverable, right? After those are the ones that have a really solid culture, because they know how every aspect of this step works. And it seems that back to the leadership aspect, it does start at the top. Okay. They're driving the vision.
Absolutely.
Right? But they're also, to me, the great leaders create more leaders. So I think what they're trying to do, Doug, is like what you're saying. They're trying to make their managers also leaders. And when they can get that combination, things really hum along. And that's why they're able to produce. Would you agree with that?
I agree with you totally. In fact, I've got a phrase I challenge people with, and what I say is good leaders can get stuff done, but great leaders build other leaders. And I agree with you totally. I'll give you a quick example I know of. There's a gentleman I got to meet a couple of years ago. He owns a plumbing company in Denver, and he has built a culture that has to do with client satisfaction. But part of the way he gets there and he gets buy-in, he's big on creating vision boards for the company and for the individuals. And he has a quarterly cookout kind of thing with the whole team. And he's up now. Last time I talked to him, I think he's running 40 trucks now. It's a good sized plumbing company. And, so you do the math, 40 trucks, you got a master and an apprentice, and so you're talking close to 100 head count for the whole thing. But he has these cookouts quarterly, and he brings everybody in and he invites them to work on personal vision boards, and basically it's the question, what's next for you, yourself, your family, your spouse, your little tribe around you. What are you focused on being able to accomplish? And then they do that individually, and then they will ultimately, they'll put those vision boards in the meeting room, on the wall for everybody to see and everybody to share and everybody to understand. But then they will do an exercise for the company level. They'll have everybody inputting, what's next for the company? What do we want to do? What do we want to build? And He's got a lot of values that he has baked into his culture. For instance, being plumbing is not a clean job. It can get messy really fast. Well, one of the things he says to his techs is, you can't show up on an appointment in a dirty shirt or dirty pair of pants. You need to take extra clothes on the truck. If you get trashed out on your very first appointment, I want you to go change clothes and be ready for clean for the next one. Now, he provides company work shirts. He's taken a baseball theme and created these jersey looking shirts with his company brand on it. And, but he stocks the trucks. I mean, everybody gets an issuance of those things. But it's just those small things that are standards that they talk about and they promote, and they ask very aggressively, they ask for customer feedback, and inevitably they get it because customers are very happy with the way the techs show up and the way they clean up the work site and leave things as they go. And that's what you want in a residential plumbing deal. You want people to feel like, well, this guy respected my property. He cleaned up after himself, left me with a condition that was better than he found it.
Yeah, it's a service business. You're there to serve. So it just, used to be kind of the norm. And now I do the same thing in my book. And when I work with these same guys, it's like, who are you showing up as? Like you're saying, that matters. Some people might be, I got to put 4 shirts in the truck. Yeah, probably 6. Okay. Like, I don't know. Like, is that really
yeah. How many appointments do you have today?
Yeah. And what else, is like, well, what are you representing? Well, that is company culture. That's the thing. Like, and that's an expectation. When you're hired there's an expectation of this, right? You don't get to not do that. Right. So they load them up because they understand the value of that.
Well, the way he enforces it, it's real interesting. He actually runs a little contest, and their shtick is, it's actually, well, I'll name the company. It's called High Five Plumbing, and their logo is, somebody doing a high five with a 5 in it. And their shtick is, when they're done, they talk to the homeowner. They say, gee, Mr. Walsh, are you happy with what we did today? And the homeowner goes, yeah, y'all did a good job. Well, I tell you what, would you mind stepping out on the porch here on the front porch as I leave? And could we take a picture of us doing a high five? And they go, ha, 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 yeah, that'll be fun. So they, slap and picture and snap. Well, unbeknownst to the homeowner, what's going on, there's a contest. And the more pictures a tech can get of doing that high five during the week, there's a bonus at the end of the week. And so it's a little bit of fun, but it has to be presented well to the homeowner to make them participate. And they boost that opportunity by, guess what? Company training. He brings his guys in 3 times a week. 3 hours of training he does every week for every employee. And some people say in a service business, man, that's downtime. You're killing your churn time on your business. He says, nay. He said, I get it back in spades.
Yeah, that's such a good takeaway, Doug, because people, again, they don't understand investment. They're hustle and grind, their work and go out and do. They don't understand the investment in your people, in your process, in your customers, right? They don't understand what all this does. That brand that we talk about, how they feel, that high five, that's brilliant. It's like, it's the, who is the trash company? Come in and they had this hat and they push a button. It makes this noise. What else can we do for you? They say that. They push a little button. It makes this music, goes off their thing, and that becomes the thing. It's ridiculous, but it works. And everyone does. So instead of doing one thing, getting rid of one couch, they're leaving with 4 things because people want to hear them make the noise again. You know what I mean? It's like silly things, but like, well, man, he just quadrupled the business. But they're training them to do this stuff, to make them comfortable with it, and all that stuff. And I think it's really important, and it's very innovative to me, to be able to do that, because if you're not investing in your people, okay, if you're just investing on people getting work done, okay, no one's staying. You're going to have, even back to the high turnover. There's other companies, they can go to any company or whatever. We talk about this often.
On that note, let me give you another example of what this guy does. The owner, it's real common in the trades that people work for a while and maybe they get their master license and all that, and then they get to feeling good and they go, I think I'd go start my own company. Whatever this owner's making, I can make that. So I'll go start my own business. Well, traditionally in the trades, when someone on your payroll does that, they are declared dead to you. Get out of here, give me the keys, go away, leave me alone. You're taking my business, blah, blah, blah. Well, this guy does it 180 degrees opposite. He says, you want to start a company? Tell you what, let me make a deal with you. Hang with me for a little while. He says, here's what I'm going to do. I will mentor you for the next 90 days. I will tell you everything you ever want to learn about running a plumbing company. I'll show you how I do it. I'll show you what's involved. We'll talk about suppliers. We'll talk about all of it. You do that. And then if you still want to go start a plumbing business, more power to you. Godspeed. You go with my blessing and you'll be really ready to make it a winner. Well, last time I talked to him over a couple of year run, he had 5 guys in his company come to him, different times, different periods, say, hey, boss, I think I'm going to quit. I think I'm going to go start a business. And he'll make them that offer. Well, 4 out of the 5 guys sat with him for those 90 days. And at the end of the 90 days, they said, hell no, I don't want the pain and all of the hassles of doing this. The way we're set up here, I can make about 200 grand with you just as a master tech, and I don't have any headaches. I get to go home and hang it up at the end of the day, and I'm not worrying about anything or anybody. So only 1 out of the 5 guys was still motivated to go do it on his own.
And here's the good thing about that. This is the next level of genius the guy's doing. When you do that with that guy, that 5th man who then went out on his own, guess what he knows? All the right ways to do things. So when he goes out, he's not going to undercut you. It's going to be very difficult because he's going to understand how to price. Now you got an equal playing field, right? So that's a win for the original owner. There's another thing, another guy I knew did that I loved. I always share this same principle, but when Pum wanted to leave, like they got a promotion, one guy went to run like a whole community college, HVAC stuff. Okay. And he goes, anyone who leaves, they get a going away party. They get their picture on the wall of fame in the office. It says where they're going, and everything else. It might be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But when they go, other people come in. They're like, well, what's this? He goes, that's the wall of fame. See, he started here, but then he worked his way up and, there's ceilings. Sometimes there's ceilings at jobs, if you're one of those people that want to go, and he goes, hey, now he runs this whole community college. This guy does this. He runs this. And I told him, I said, I love it. I love the whole concept. I said, you know what else? What you're going to get from that is amazing referrals for apprentices, because they're going to meet people at that college or wherever they're at, and someone wants a job and you need to go work for this guy. Go work for the guy I did, man. He'll get you ready. He'll train you up because he gives everyone all the top training, the whole thing. He goes, and then if you feel like you want to go somewhere, you can. Super cool about it. Gives you, or you can stay there forever because it's a great company. So he's getting these really high-end referrals for his business, which is not a small thing.
No,
I assure you.
In the service business in particular, the more you can organically grow your talent rather than just have to go to the market and recruit. And that's another thing this one guy does. He has his own sort of trade school program that he's developed that, a young person can leave high school, literally, come to work for him under this program. Now he's going to start at minimum wage, but in a very short time, and he lays out these milestones. You accomplish these 3 things, you're going to get a raise. It might be 50 cents an hour, 75 cents, something like that, $1 an hour maybe, but it's stair-stepped over about a 2-year period. And by the time you're done with the 2-year, you're ready to sit for your apprentice certificate with the trades and get on the journey of getting your proper credentials. And you've got all the training and all the development you'd ever want. And talk about building loyalty. Those guys are saying, man, I started from minimum wage and now I'm making the $40, $50 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time, the blue collar is the new white collar. They're going to be the new wealthy. They're not going to be replaced by all the other odd things. But when you're skilled that way, like the guy, he can make 200 working for someone. Okay, that's not chump change even today.
Right.
It used to be a lot more. Okay, but today it's still a lot of money. Like you said, you go to work and you go home and you can shut it off. Ownership, we don't get that privilege.
No.
This wheel is always turning, right? But
that's right.
But again, that's why that guy has 100 plus guys working for him. 40 trucks, that whole thing, which I love. I mean, that's a forward thinker from a leadership standpoint, right? That's someone who gets the big picture, who's really building a legacy, if you will, right, in that business and putting that stuff in place.
Well, and he is truly leading the business. He is leaning in heavy on the people development, recognizing them as fellow human beings that each have their own sense of purpose and wanting to belong. And then he gives them something to belong to.
That's it. And that's what people, and without getting on the soapbox today, okay, a lot of people, they're missing that. There's a lot of fatherlessness, right? That's a huge plague in our country. So who are they going to follow? I mean, you get a guy who's built a company, works with his hands, right? That's noble stuff, right? And then you get to belong to that. Sure beats being in a gang, okay? And you're making money and your responsibility. You're driving company vehicles. You're making 6-figure plus. I mean, yeah, you're going to stay. It sounds like the way this guy does too. He's also developing great character in his people. There's a guy here local where I'm at here in Wisconsin. He's actually out of Edgerton, Wisconsin. He created Craftsman with Character. It's a program for high school kids, and he trains them and he takes them to businesses. And every week they go there for, I think, a semester, and they go through each section of the business. They spend like 2 hours there on a Friday, and they learn all about it. So he picks a manufacturing company or whatever, and he goes and and they get to see how everything works, and they discuss it on the day. Well, he's doing that for about 10 years, taking this to different schools. Wasn't getting a lot of traction. It was going good, but the Navy got wind of it. Bam, dropped millions with them. We need this. Get this. Now it's going around the country because these kids are like, they need to do something. Like you said, not everyone's going to college, even less now, right? They're like, let's get out, make money. Let's do what we got to do. Let me work with my hands. Give me some purpose. 4 years, a lot of times in college is a listless adventure. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
For these guys, right? So it's not for everybody, but man, when they get to work and produce every day and see the fruit of their labor on a daily basis, even the guys with the high five in the pictures getting that bonus. Okay. That's work. You get to achieve that. You get to earn that bonus, and now they become really, really engulfed in the culture of the business. I love it. So again, that guy's really a forward thinker.
Yeah.
With this
totally.
business, it's very impressive. So one thing I was thinking, Doug, is if we're looking to build leaders / managers, okay, I'm going to kind of stay on that a little bit. You mentioned now that, and I see it more too, they're starting to become this realization that that's a necessary thing, that they really can't be separated anymore because they're not as effective. Like you said, the managers get things done. Okay. But they're also probably the most hated person in the company often. Right. And there's nothing healthy about that either. Right. So
right.
the leadership, I think, is where things get, for lack of a better term, they soften those edges. Right. They kind of create that balance to lead and do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, let me interject something from the employee standpoint. So if you're out there listening and you're owning a business or you're leading a team at work of some sort, think about it this way. Everybody on your team, every human being has an ability to show up and they can operate from one of two gears. Gear number one is the basic stuff. I understand my job description. I've got a sense of what I've got to do to accomplish my work, quote, quote. I'm using air quotes for those who are listening. I understand all that. And if I give that every day, that's okay. The business is going to move forward because they described the job. They said what they need out of this position, and that's what I'm going to give them. I'm willing to do that. Great. Everybody's happy and hunky-dory, right? And that's the scenario that works okay with the manager type person. Now, every employee may not go home happy at the end of the day, but work got done. The company's happy in that regard. The second gear, though, is the one I really want to talk about. That's what I call discretionary effort gear. That's that little extra, that's go the extra mile, that extra 10% or extra anything that an employee can give to a business. And they have a choice. That's why it's called discretionary. They can choose to give it or not. And when your people are not operating in that second gear, most of the time, you haven't done what you need to do as a leader to get them motivated and inspired in the right kind of way. And they may be willing to kick into that gear because of a push for a deadline or an urgent problem that's bubbled up, a flash fire of some sort you got to deal with. Yeah, everybody's going to go, when the building's on fire, everybody's operating in second gear, that's a true fact. But it's that effective leader that can inspire and influence people to give in that second gear most of the time. And they're happy to do it. They feel good about doing it. They're doing it because everybody around them is doing it. Everybody, no one person is the only one giving. Everybody is pitching in. And if you're leading a small business or a small team, it's happening when you walk out to the shop floor or the office and you look around and go, "Hey, where's Sally?" And somebody says, "Oh, Sally had a sick kid at work. She had to leave. I got her covered. I know what she's doing. I've got it taken care of, boss. Don't worry about it." We weren't even going to tell you she was going to leave because we got it covered.
Right.
And that is a win-win all the way around when you got people volunteering to help each other out, help level the load. And it is a give and take. Again, it's not one person getting abused or taken advantage of.
Right. When you said two gears, I think back to my first 20 years in my first business. I had two gears I demanded from me and everyone else, high and off. That's the only ones I wanted. You work as hard as you can or dead. Okay. So I was such a jerk. But it was just, I would never, it's funny because Doug, in the beginning, people would call me a leader or I'd say you're in leadership or I'd be leading my guys. And what I realized over time, especially now looking back, is basically how I led was hire people like me who had the same mindset, who liked to work and do this stuff. So there wasn't anything special about my leadership. Nothing. Except I had guys who were like me. So I really was kind of like one of the guys, and then they started the work. They worked really well together. They understood everyone had a job and they did their thing and all that. It was really cool. And then eventually it got to where they wouldn't let me work with them because I just messed things up. Okay. Because it's not the system anymore. Right. So it was really good that way. But I never was good. When I had someone who wasn't like that, their days were numbered from day one, and I didn't consciously do that. I look back now and I go, yeah, it was pretty predictable. These people aren't going to make it, but we give them a shot. But it's just interesting. So I've seen over time, over the last 35 years, just that change towards quality leadership, the stuff you're talking about, like what can I do? And as I build a new company, how do I empower the people? How do I get them the training for that? Because I'm not the one to train them. Here's the key. Okay. You want it, but it doesn't mean you're the one to give it. Okay. If you're not the expert leader, why would you be trying to train someone to be a good leader? This is where we hire out. Okay. This is where coaches and all that good stuff come in, right? Let's just talk about that for a minute because I think sometimes, Doug, and you may run into this as well. Sometimes when as an owner, you feel like if you have to get an expert to come in, again, not everybody, but you feel like you've failed.
Mm-hmm.
I failed. I don't know that I gotta bring someone in to teach my guys how to lead. I own the company. How do I not know how to lead? There's a difference, right? There's different.
Absolutely.
Leadership comes in a lot of shapes. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. No, you're touching on a big thing, especially for the entrepreneur out there that's already started a business and is in the process of growing the business in whatever stage you might be in. There's that inevitable growth and so let's talk about the stages real quick, and I've heard it described a lot of different ways. I tend to think of it as a 4-stage growth model. You've got that startup phase where everything is urgent, everything's critical, and you're the founder and you're chief everything officer. And I mean, literally, I think of companies I started, I was going to the store at night to buy toilet paper for the bathroom at the shop because nobody else was going to have toilet paper if I didn't go buy it, and so that's that startup phase. But then you go into a little bit of a grow up phase where you're starting to see traction. You're starting to get some volume. You might feel the need to hire more people so that you can make the production you've got to make. Now, that becomes the big pivot point. As you start adding people, you have to start thinking about the management and leadership. And that we can talk about systems and process and all of that, but it's very much part of that growth phase. And then you really get to the scale phase when you really have some meaningful traction, and now you're really starting to see the numbers take off. That's another chapter as an owner to think about, how do you really want to run this? And that's about the time you need to start thinking about team leaders or general manager or superintendent or something like that, in terms of building a layer underneath or between you as the owner and everybody else. And it's not building a layer for the sake of organization or starting to look like, General Motors. That's not it at all, but it's the practical reality of span of control. And it's inevitable. And those stages 2 and 3 is when I see owner founders start to struggle, because they, to your point, they do get hung up on the little bit of ego. Let's call it what it is. A little bit of ego, like I should know this, I should be able to do this, and if I don't, what's wrong with me? And there's a fear of it somehow facing that and admitting it. But the irony is, the more open you are to admitting it, the more strength you're going to find. The people around you, they're not going to think less of you. They're going to respect you for making that call, saying, I can't be on every project. I can't be on every order. I need a team doing that. And I need somebody leading that team that's not me. And I don't want to be the bottleneck in the business anymore. And a quick side story on that note, I interviewed a guy on my podcast who was part of a very successful restaurant chain in California that he had 2 partners in the business. And together, the 3 of them really knew most everything you ever wanted to know about running a restaurant. And they had some success. They went through the scaling part. I think they had gotten up to, I think he told me it was close to 30 locations. And it was just this 3-headed monster that was running the thing, the 3 of them. And finally, one day they sat down and they were looking at everything. And one guy raised his hand and said, I think we need a CEO, and I'm not him. I know me. I'm not good for that. And the other 2 guys, almost in unison, said, we've been thinking the same thing, and we agree. We're not them either. So together, the 3 of them had the wisdom to admit their weaknesses and say, let's go recruit a CEO. And by the way, let's recruit somebody that's maybe run $100 million enterprise. And we're not there yet, but we seem to be on a trajectory we could be. And sure enough, you know what? They did. They hired the guy, found a guy that knew a bigger scale business model. He brought that in, and sure enough, a few years later, they sold the whole thing for $100 million.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's awesome. And we talk about this a lot too, Doug, is us as the entrepreneur, we're usually the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of where things stop. We're the bottleneck, we're the stumbling block, we're all those things. And it's that realization like those 3 guys had. It's so freeing when you get that, because you can like truly delegate, but now like on that, now you're a true founder. You got other people running this high level stuff, and you're like, you just get to like spend time on vision. Like, where are we going with this? It's kind of cool. You're not, it's so much is lifted from your shoulders on that. And I love it when people can see that sooner. Like just, that's why these podcasts are great, right? We get to hear from other people, hear your angle, my angle, this guy, this guest, these people come on and you're going, oh man, this was not around when I was doing this. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have anything. I
Well,
wasn't
that's right.
taking advice anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered because that wasn't me the first 20 years. I wasn't listening to anybody. But it's really amazing now what we're able to do through this medium, through the coaching in general, because there was no coaches back then. There might have been some super high level executive coaching for $1 gazillion and whatever, but you had to be making, whatever. You're not getting at this level now with the small business and everything else. I just want to encourage people, like, you have to look at these things, because we compress time. That's what we do. We take all our experience, we take 10 years and we put it in one. Who doesn't want that? Like, that's my thing. Like, the costly mistakes, bad decisions, maybe even your business failing. Who wants that? You can prevent that, and it's an investment. Just like that CEO, look what it did for those guys, because they all had the epiphany at the same time, and it's an amazing thing. So I just love it. So any final words, just to kind of encouragement, kind of this leadership focus? I think we hit a really unique kind of track here, Doug. I really like kind of how we went through this stuff. So let's put a bow on this. I'm gonna let you do that.
Okay.
Because you're way better at this stuff than I am. So no pressure, but make it great.
Yeah. Well, appreciate that. Yeah. No pressure. But no, seriously, I think what we've said, if I had to sum it up, I would say to the owner founders out there that are maybe struggling a little bit right now, this might be time to look in the mirror and ask yourself some honest questions. Can I really keep this thing going the way I wanted it to, the way I'm doing it right now? And, the classic Einstein definition of insanity, keeping doing the same thing and expecting different results. And even if it's just as simple as calling one of us, having a 1 hour consult, tell your story and let us, give you some insight and input and suggestions. I'm always willing to take discovery calls with people and just talk through their situations, see where they are. And to our point we made a minute ago, maybe I'm a fit for you, maybe I'm not, maybe Richard will be a fit, maybe he's not, but at least have the discussion and see if there's not something that can emerge as a new opportunity for the next chapter you're trying to write in your business, because businesses are their own living and breathing organisms. And if you're going to really keep it on a positive track, moving and growing as you probably expect it to, you're going to have to change with it. And it's that awareness as the owner founder to become the leader you need to be for the business, and stand up and ask yourself those tough questions, get input from an outside source, and see if you can't, really find your way to that next level.
I love it. So I will add nothing to that. It's perfect. Now, give us a website, whatever we got, so they can get in touch with you, Doug, do a discovery call, whatever they're thinking. You read a lot of articles. You do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, stuff like that. So kind of make sure they know where to go here just to follow you, because you're a wealth of information.
Yeah, so 3 opportunities to check out. One is my personal coaching website, which is Doug Thorpe. That's THORPE.com. That is where my blog archive is for all of the leadership articles I've been writing for the last 10 years. There's a whole wealth of information there in blog form. My company website is Headway Exec. That's HEADWAY. exec.com. There we talk a lot more about the small business and mid-cap company game. We talk a lot about company growth and individual effort. I have a team of advisors that are with me there. We've got specialists that can come in and engage with you if you're looking for, if you wanted to hire an advisory board, I've got people you can pick from that could serve roles in that capacity, or any direct consulting or advisory work for your business. And the third thing I will mention is my own podcast called Leadership, powered by Common Sense. That's the show that Richard was on a couple of months ago, and we are rapidly coming up on episode number 400 for that show. Ooh. So we have a big archive there as well, and it is available on all streaming services as well as YouTube. The title again is Leadership, powered by Common Sense.
I love it. Doug, this has been amazing, as I knew it would be. This has been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank you for all your time today. I know everyone got a ton of value out of this, and that's what this show's all about. And for everyone else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast.
And don't forget, Revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So if you want to see how I can show you at least $100,000 in hidden annual profits in less than 3 minutes, and not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend, guaranteed, just go to sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. See how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. Do it now.